We have the Killer Bees here, and to my left is
Mr. Cifuentes.
and then
Mr. Morris.
and then
Mrs. Fortson.
and then
Miss Delasco.
and Miss Stevick,
And Miss Warling.
and we're gonna start off our talk show. Who wants to volunteer to go first?
I'll go. I'm doing blog post number 3 by Mr. Cole, in which he discusses the triangle concept that Descartes delves into. He talks about the fact that the concept of a triangle being 3 angles that add up to 90 degrees doesn't tell us that a triangle actually exists in the world, which I thought was pretty intriguing, and it kind of goes into the whole concept of reality that Descartes talks a lot about. So my basic question is, going off of that concept, can we really be sure of anything's existence? Because can't we always just, wake up from the next dream or find out that we were insane or awake from the computer that's controlling us? To the floor.
Well, that's very interesting because, according to Descartes, we can't trust anything that we sense, our ears, our eyesight, our touch, anything. And it's interesting to me because if you believe in that, also the way you perceive things would be wrong. And because of that, the way you understand the world would be wrong as well. So, if Descartes would believe that all our senses are incorrect, maybe his perception of the world is incorrect as well.
So how do we know that the mind's right?
I think therefore I am, right?
But
you know that you exist because you're able to think, but you don't know that what you're perceiving around you actually exists.
and since
Yeah.
it's not a sense, we can actually trust our mind.
But that's the thing. If you can't trust your senses, our minds are.
Well, what makes up our mind other than
Wouldn't
our
your mind
senses?
be empty then if you can't trust your senses?
Yeah, because everything
Yeah.
you perceive is through your senses, which is then your mind, right?
Exactly. So if you can't trust your senses.
So like
what's
even
in
when
your
he's
mind?
perceiving I think therefore I am, as if he's still like thinking about himself being there.
Yeah, but that's not a sense. I think by senses he means like seeing and feeling, and because what,
And
yeah,
smelling.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
But like he didn't use any of those in order to arrive at that conclusion, did he? I don't think so.
But our mind, if we can't trust our senses, we perceive things around us change drastically. If we can't trust them, And our mind is like as we grow up, our mind is affected by our senses. It's molded by our senses. So can we really trust what our mind is right now if we can't trust our senses that molded it?
Well, he also talked about how our senses can be wrong sometimes. Like sometimes you can look at like a tower from far away and it looks different than it would when it's up close, or like something like that. So, or like hallucinations when your mind is something that it's actually not. So then you can't really trust what's happening.
Yeah, that's what my central question kind of is. Like in the moment when your senses are being deceived, you don't really know it. Like when you're hallucinating something, you don't know that you're
Right.
hallucinating. So like, can we ever really be sure that what we're all experiencing right now is anything other than a hallucination?
I don't know, someone's blog post, I think it was Mr. Mentos, but it was wrote about like assuming stuff, but I feel like we can't get anywhere in life if we don't assume.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that, if we assume that like Descartes says like all of our senses perceive us, like deceive us or whatever, and like then we're assuming that our mind doesn't. So even with like assuming that I think therefore I am, he's still assuming that his mind doesn't deceive him. So
Yeah, and I also feel like it's more internal, not more of the senses from like your environment and things like that. I just feel like it's more like internal, like I'm thinking. So it's like he's thinking in his mind, not using his like physical senses, like kind of his soul almost.
Yeah.
okay, so great question. Who wants to volunteer next?
I'll go next. My blog post that I looked at was from Mr. Smith, and it was blog post number 3, and he was talking about I think therefore I am too. So it was kind of the same deal about like thinking about why we exist and how can he say this even though like he is like doubting all of his senses and things like that. So the question is kind of why do you think he's laying this out as one of his foundations when it's so like controversial?
Well, the thing is, there would be no point in thinking about all this doubt. There'd be no point in doing that if he didn't exist. So why would he? I mean, that's why I think he started with that effort beforehand, because if he didn't exist, if he couldn't at least prove that, if he couldn't at least say that or claim that, there'd be no point in him saying, "Oh, there is a God and there's all these other things that are true," if he doesn't exist.
Yeah, I agree. Like the lack of your own existence renders literally everything else useless. So there's no point in writing books and devoting your entire life to philosophy if you can't even be sure of your own existence. And also, I think, considering how deep all of his philosophical doubt is, you have to, as someone said before, you have to believe in something. You have to assume something in order to not drive yourself crazy. And so I think that's why I made that assumption.
Sense. Anyone else? No? Okay, I'm gonna do mine next because it's still, I think, therefore I am. I did blog post number 3 by Mr. McKernan, and he talked about Descartes saying the image of the soul and how people are easily persuaded and just take things for other people to say them, not for themselves. And then he asked if people think something is unimaginable, then it's not trying to reach it. And so I was thinking people today do that. If they don't think that it's there, they're not going to try and prove that it is, or they just go by what other people tell them. So my question is, what do you guys think? Do people try not to get to it if it's unimaginable? By unimaginable, unreal, no one's ever said oh, this exists, a unicorn today or something, that sort of thing.
Well, it isn't common, but I think it does happen. We got many advances in science and technology that I think would prove that people still strive for that. Even the atomic bomb it was crazy to think that you could divide an atom. And people went and they researched this and they thought about this and they really looked into it and they came up with the atom bomb. And that's because people were visionaries and they saw into it was unimaginable and they came up with an idea.
But is that basing it off of something else? Or is that something new? Is attaining something unimaginable something that's not related to anything else? Or is it coming off of other things? Or does it matter? Is unimaginable?
What do you mean by something unimaginable?
So the atomic bomb, we already know about atoms. So is that technically not unimaginable because we can say that was just an advance in science? Or is any advance in science unimaginable until we get there?
I think it's all relative to who we're talking about, because someone in 6000 AD, it would have been unimaginable to just blow up an entire city like that. So I think all progress kind of builds on itself, and the iPhone, even to someone in 1950, it would have been crazy to think that we have all of this technology in this 2014 device. And so, but to all of us, next year when the new iPhone comes out, it's not going to be unimaginable. It's going to be very imaginable. So it's relative, I think.
So is there anything that is unimaginable? Besides in your current sense, could we really see something as that's never going to be real? Do you think that's realistic to say that?
I think it's realistic just because I feel people go off things off their own ideas and their thoughts, and it's kind of not, at first it's not going to be reachable. They're going to be oh, I want to do this, people are going to be no. So I'm just thinking about things that you can't really imagine. I don't think any of us can picture DNA, what it actually looks like in your body, and things things like that. So I think people, for advances to happen, they kind of have to go on a leap to imagine it themselves. I don't think it's obviously it's going to be really hard to get to, but I think it has to be imagined. It's kind of something that's out of their reach at first.
Yeah, I agree. You think about mermaids and stuff like that. There's still people going out in the ocean trying to find mermaids. You don't think that they're really you don't think that they could actually be there, but there's definitely people who keep striving to try to find them. So.
I mean, I think they do. I mean, personally, if I think something exists that much, then I will spend my whole life proving it. How Descartes spent his whole entire life tearing down everything he's ever done to rebuild it because he thought that something unimaginable was attainable, and apparently it was because we still read it and follow it today. All right, so who wants to go next?
Well, you mentioned tearing down his frequency of the world. And my question was about part 3, which talks about his maxims. Actually mentioning Mr. Morris's blog post. He criticized Descartes a lot. I feel like he did because you mentioned that, for example, his first maxim is obeying the laws and customs of his country, just because they're in place. And you say that he shouldn't be doing this because the reason he should obey laws is not because they're in place, but because they are because they're morally correct, or because you trust the laws or believe the laws to be correct. I just want to see what we don't know Mr. Rose's opinion, but well, I was just wondering what you guys thought about that question. Should we follow laws because they're in place, or because you believe them to be correct?
I think both, because I could believe a law not to be correct, but if I don't follow it, then I'm going to jail and I won't be able to do anything for the rest of my life. So there's like a standard. I can't not follow it. Like, I can't tell someone, like, lock someone up in a closet and expect to, like, get away with it because those are my beliefs and, like, I think I have the right to do that. But I think there's also, to a certain extent, where you shouldn't. Like, I don't know, like faith, touchy subject, but if you believe in something, you're obviously not going to go against a law that's completely against your faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's my thought.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sam.
Okay.
I saw the question.
Like, I agree, like, if you have your own personal beliefs, like, go ahead and follow that, but like Peggy said, like, if you don't follow the rules of, like, where you live or something, you could go to jail and jeopardize your whole life. So I don't think that's really worth not following the laws. So.
No, I agree with you too, for the most part, again, because the reason he's doing this is not because he believes in the laws or because he approves of what they say, but it's just because while he's thinking about all these things, about all this radical doubt, he's gonna need something to keep him out of prison. Basically, he can't just go doing whatever he wants just because he doesn't believe in anything. And this is what is holding him down. Really, these maxims are basically anchoring him to reality. They're not. This is what makes him not lose his mind, I think, because in a certain way, while believing in nothing, he believes in the rules, or he believes that the consequences of the rules. Like, he knows what will happen if he breaks them, and this is what's holding him down, I think.
I think he also, like, doesn't he say, like, somewhere he talks about how, like, he actually, like, I can't think of a word. He actually, like, applauds some place because they made, like, one person made, like, a group of people made the rules, or one person made the rules, and it was, like, set towards one goal, like, you can tell.
Oh.
I
So-
think it was Sparta.
Yeah.
It's
Smart.
like the difference of like when before they had like different cities and different sections, and
Yeah.
everybody had their own laws, and then like when it was like all Greece was like put together and all of Sparta was put together, they had like one ruler, laws for everyone that everybody had to follow. So it was like a big like joint.
It was very
basically.
organized.
So it was, like, one thing, so I feel like if you gave him a law that was, like, off one person that, like, made sense and was working towards a common goal, then he would believe in it, because that's what he thinks, if that makes sense.
I think he also makes the point at one time that laws should be made basically all at the same time, because that's a lot more efficient. Which I don't know. I mean, like, if all of our laws were determined, 40 years ago, I mean, I think there'd be a big disconnect there. I mean, let alone like 200 years ago. So I think you kind of need to update them and keep it going.
I think he also wants to have everything progress at the same time, almost not just have something stay like kind of constant for like ever, but just like have everything stay at like if you make a leap, everyone makes a leap together. Kind of just how he was talking about like his city and things like that. So I just think if you keep everything different, like you change at different times, he doesn't like that at all. I think he wants everyone to take like the next advancement together.
Yeah, not.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, not exactly. Not just that there's going to be one set of rules since the beginning of time, but also the idea that if there's going to be law reform, you should probably reform the whole law according to that one rule that you're changing, not just one area of it, which will affect everything else, but make it all connect, make it all just one purpose. Yeah, I think that's what he's looking for.
I agree. I think it makes sense to make the laws like as you move one forward, like move them all forward, because it's like if one section of like a law is progressing, like maybe you're talking about like city laws, whereas like state laws aren't progressing, like the difference between a city and a state law, then like what if you do something wrong in a city, but like technically it's not wrong for the state. Like I think that's what you were saying makes sense, where you have to like bring everything along together rather than like one at a time, which is where he was like coming in with like not setting all the laws at one time, but like maybe setting the laws together, whereas like when you improve one, you can improve them all at the same time, kind of thing.
I think a perfect example of what he kind of would hate is right now marijuana law. Yeah, the fact that people in Colorado and Washington can legally smoke pot, but it's still illegal at the federal level. But I don't know, I feel like there's some kind of value to the idea of allowing people at the local level to kind of determine their own laws. I don't know. I mean, what standard would you want? Would you want like a worldwide standard to us all move forward? Or, I don't know, I feel like it's a slippery slope to go down.
I think he also feels like as long as it's working towards a common sort of idea, then it's like still within it, like he thinks that it's right. Like when my friends were out the other day, like, I mean, told you guys I'm not into like politics or government at all, but she was like, the government was founded to like protect our property and like our rights, but they also see like ourselves as like, I am property of myself, if that makes sense. So like I feel like Descartes would be like, as long as there is one common goal as it progresses, then it's still accurate. So even if it's like, I mean, 40 years later, that's, you need to change it, but it still needs to be towards a common goal of good.
I agree, but I think like what you're saying about like a world standard or like a country standard kind of thing, I don't think like a world standard would work. If you think about it, like there are third world countries and then there's like superpower countries, but like we don't have the same mindset, we don't have the same goals right now, so making worldwide laws really isn't like a realistic position to go at.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
It even varies from state to state. Like if we're comparing this to California, it's a lot different. And then what they're trying to achieve and what their problems are a lot different than our problems. So it definitely has to vary from state to state too, I feel like.
Definitely. Alright, which one of you wants to go?
I'll go. I did Mr. Vidal's post, and it was his second post of Group A, and it was he explained how Descartes claims that humans would be better off if we had like full reasoning from when we were born, in order to make decisions, but instead of having to like follow like our teachers to tell us like what to do or whatever, because children usually don't have that full reasoning yet. And my question was like, what actually shapes our reasoning? Like, is it our own experience, like personal experiences, or is it like something else that shapes our reasoning?
Well, earlier I was talking about how the senses affect the mind and how they mold it in a certain way, and that's the same thing that you're talking about. I feel that the way you experience things changes how you look at things in the world. People might go into a room and see very different things than what you see because they experience different things, and this does affect them. And that reasoning is the same. Like if you, like the way you grow up, the way you're taught, definitely affects the way you think and the way you reason. People might think more long term if they grow up in a certain area, or more short term if they grow up in another. It all depends on how you grow up, in some extent at least. That's how I feel.
I agree. I think it's how you grow up, but also like your experiences and everything with growing up. But like there are also like things that like you need to learn in order to like be like a legal adult, I guess, one day. Like if you just like live in a household and you never are taught like laws and rules and never go to school and stuff, and how can you go out into the world and like try and find a job or like follow the laws of the world and everything? Like there are, to a certain extent, like it follows your experiences and all that, but to another extent, like you need that learning aspect as well.
Yeah, I think education from our teachers is a big aspect. I think it shapes the way we all think right now too. Just from like our experience with our teachers, we'd be like, oh, I really like science in elementary school, so I'm gonna do it now. Or I really like reading, so I'm gonna be like a writer. So I think that kind of shapes us as we grow up without us knowing it.
Yeah, I think that even in less formal settings, we learn things that form our reasoning. Like it kind of sounds good to skip life and get your reasoning, but you really can't. Like you learn to not touch a hot stove by touching it. You can't skip that process. You have to experience things in order to understand them, in order to gain your reasoning. And I think that's unavoidable.
Yeah. So we need knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
Lauren, well, Miss Worley.
Okay. I did blog post number 3 by Mr. Morrell, and he talks about Descartes' thoughts and concerns about publishing his work and like what would happen if he published his now before like, or after he died, like the difference between the two. And Mr. Mal brought up like the fact that Descartes fears the controversies and criticisms he might get if he publishes before he dies. So my question was, does he kind of like doubt his method, do you think, and that's why he's like afraid of publishing it while he's alive so he can hear all that criticism? And is he like still kind of unsure about his work, or is it just he doesn't really want to hear the criticism of it?
Well, I mean, I wrote up in class the other day, like, I think that as much as he says it's like all him, he needs people to follow him, because you can't bring something up and not, like, if no one follows it, it's just going to go down the drain, like, it's going to be forgotten about. We wouldn't be reading it today. So I think he's scared of having something that he thinks is foundational and set, and then everyone else being like, no. And that, like, no matter who you are, if no one believes in you, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I think he's afraid of his actual method. I think he trusts it pretty good. Like, he's very confident of his method. I think what made him doubt all this was the fact that people have very different points of views about very, very different things. And he doesn't want people to be harassing him for the rest of his life because he published one book. He wants to concentrate on his work and just, do it right. And if people are bothering him, he can't do that correctly. And that's what that's what he's afraid of, I think.
But wouldn't it be more beneficial to like publish maybe all or like part of it like while he's alive, and then he can get that feedback, whether it be good or bad, or like someone tear it apart or someone say, this is great, here's what I've learned, like maybe this can help you out, and like give him feedback that no matter how it comes at him, like it could help him improve the rest of his method, the rest of his book, for then it to be published again later.
But his whole method is based on himself and what he believes and what he wants. His whole idea is in tearing out everything that he's learned from other people and using only what he knows. I don't think he really wants, criticism. I think he's fine with the way he did it the first time.
Yeah, I feel like he just doesn't want to get knocked down too far to the point where he can't get back up from that criticism, because it is his own personal work. So it's like you putting something that you put your entire, like it's all your kind of existence kind of is pretty much in that book. And if you're knocked down, you can't continue, you can't keep thinking like this. He wants to keep coming out with these ideas and these really concrete ideas for himself, just satisfy his own life. He doesn't want to be like knocked down that he can't keep doing it anymore.
But he also talked about, like, if he doesn't publish it and if he dies or whatever, like, his, like, works are still there. Like, somebody can find them and continue them and, like, keep going on and, like, contribute their own thoughts to it. And he said that the more input you get in science, like, the farther that you can discover things or something like that. But so that kind of contradicts his whole theory about, like, one mind and, like, breaking down the foundations or whatever. But I think he's scared of the criticisms, but he's also, like, I think he kind of wants the criticism, or doesn't want the criticism, but
Yeah, I think, the concept of putting basically your entire existence, as you said, into one book is scary. The idea that it's not going to be well received is a really scary thing. And so I think he just had the same visceral reaction any one of us would have if we published a book like this, that he was afraid, especially in a time when a lot of people weren't all that educated, that it wasn't going to be received well. And yeah, I could never really understand why he was all that afraid. So you guys' perspectives kind of shed light on it for me.
especially because he was so confident about it at the
Yeah,
beginning. He's like, this is what I think.
exactly, yeah.
So.
And throughout the book, you can see his confidence deteriorating. Like he starts off like really strong, and he doesn't want to publish, but he kind of gets to that point where it's like, can this help other people? Can other people use this method, even though it's geared towards myself? Like, can they modify it to use it for themselves? And then he gets to the point where like he wants to publish, but like he's still kind of like dropping in his confidence. He's like, I don't want to publish now because I don't want that criticism. I don't want those mean people like tearing me down, tearing my work down. Like I just want to spend my life on it. So I think like to the point that he is very confident in his work, but then like also he's like afraid of the feedback he would get for it too.
Makes sense. All right, any last thoughts, questions, concerns? Okay, join us next time for some killer thought-provoking questions from the Killer Bees.